It's Enduro season time, so this week on Supercars Talk, I've got a very special Sandown preview part 1 where I get to interview co-driver Jack Perkins. Now, originally, I'd planned to just do this as part of the normal weekly episode, but Jack, once again, very in-depth and spent a long time chatting with me. Very appreciate his time. So I've split this out into its own little episode, which actually is turning out to be quite a reasonable length episode. So here is Jack Perkins talking about the Super 2 disappointment of not getting to race at Sandown. Well, fingers crossed, maybe there is a decision looming that does get let him race in that category for the weekend. But we also have a bit of a chat about the big race on the weekend where he will be co-driving with real estate agent James Courtney. And we've got a very special guest once again, Jack Perkins on board. How's everything going?
Yeah, it's a good time of year. Obviously getting ready for the endurance races. So Sandown's a track that I love and Bathurst speaks for itself. So yeah, it's sort of every year now. Footy finals come around in the AFL circles and NRL, and then we know it's pretty close to Sandown and Bathurst. So it's an exciting time when you're a co-driver.
Yeah, and Super 2 at the moment, there's still a chance you might be racing?
Well, yeah, I mean, as we record this podcast, there is. So we're just working with Supercars on seeing how we can get on the grid. It's been an incredibly long process, and I think we're sort of doing what's asked of us at this stage. So we'll just keep doing that and see what happens.
Yeah, I can see from the rules point of view why it's been put in, but I also disappointing because it's great seeing guys like you come into the series and then the young blokes can benchmark themselves against someone who's a current co-driver.
Yeah, I mean, I put out a statement initially, and I am 100% supportive of the rule. So that's not really the question. It's not a black and white rule, if you're allowed to say that term in 2024. But it's a rule that says that there can be an exemption provided for various exceptional circumstances that are undefined. So, for us, it's not about the rule per se, because we agree with the rule and the intention of the rule, which is to protect Super 2 from having, a grid of 60 cars funded by main game teams and co-drivers at Bathurst, and then getting to Adelaide and having 10 cars because no one's interested in that. So that's the intention of the rule, and I couldn't be more supportive of it. But the rule also has a written sort of exemption clause, which has been handed out on 3 previous occasions that I can find in my research. And our reasoning and whatnot is not too dissimilar to those. So that's sort of all I can really say at this point in time. And that's what it is. There's nothing too controversial there with what I've said. That's just the facts. And we're trying to understand, how others can get exemptions. And at this point in time, we haven't got one. But like I said, we're doing what's been asked of us, and that's all we can do at this point in time.
Just out of interest, because I don't recall any time an exemption on something like this. Can you provide an example?
Yeah, so there's 3 exemptions. So in 2018, Earl Bamber was the co-driver for Shane Van Gisbergen, and he was given an exemption to race with Brenton Grove in the 250-kilometre Super 2 race. So he was a co-driver in the Super 2 race. So if that wasn't an exemption, it was a specific rule when that was a mini enduro. But from my research, I can't find anything to suggest otherwise. But in any case, if you look at Earl Bamber's Super 2 stats from a career point of view, he's had 1 start in Super 2, and it was at Bathurst in the same year he was a co-driver. In 2019, I was given an exemption myself, driving for Eagleston Motorsport. So I'd competed in 2 of the first 4 races, and I was given an exemption to go to Bathurst, which that year was actually ahead of Sandown. And then we did Sandown after Bathurst, won the round, and went to Newcastle, the last event of the season. And then in 2021, Tim Blanchard, driving for Eagleston Motorsport, was given an exemption when he only competed in Townsville and Sydney, and then was allowed to go and race at Bathurst. So both occasions were 2 races as opposed to 1 or 3, but still, exemptions were provided. So that's, again, factual information. It's not controversial. That's just what's happened, and there may be others that I've missed. But yeah, I can't reiterate how the rule is a good rule, and it was actually brought back in 2004, 2005, because now I am testing my memory, but in 2004, I don't believe it was a championship round, and David Brabham was co-driving with Dick Johnson's, and they chucked him in the development series race on the Saturday, and I think everyone thought, oh, this is going to set a bad trend. So the following year, which was the first time the Bathurst became a championship round for the development series, as it was called back then, this rule was written in its exact wording, and yeah, you can't argue with it. It's a good rule.
Yeah, as I said, I agree with the rule. I'm just a little bit surprised because, well, now you've provided some of the exemptions previously, and things like, they were going to allow an extra wildcard at Adelaide if we had a NASCAR star coming down. I can't see why they can't do it for you at Sandown.
Yeah, we feel like, when you look at the previous exemptions and some of the things we put forward as our reasoning for exceptional circumstances, we felt that they were, sort of worthy enough of what we're asking for. We're not actually asking for permission to race at Bathurst. We only want to go to Sandown, and that's a big thing for us, because the actual intention of that rule, sort of, whilst it doesn't say Bathurst, if you asked everyone in pit lane, they would think it's written for Bathurst. You can't get laps at Bathurst like you can at Sandown and other tracks. So in everyone's mind, that rule is sort of written for Bathurst. And what changed in 2016 for the first time ever was a development series race was added to another endurance race. So that's sort of where, I guess, my mind and others sort of get not confused, but the Bathurst thing becomes irrelevant because the wording of the rule is endurance event. But like I said, the rule has a written element where you can get an exemption per se, and that's sort of what we're working through with Supercars at the moment.
And from a selfish point of view, I just want to see cherry ripes get thrown out of the car.
Yeah, again, that's part of our submission. We turn up with a very neatly presented car. We pay tribute and respect to the legends of the sport. This is our 3rd year, thanks to Shaw and Partners, where we've done something really cool. It feels like a really fitting venue to do that in terms of retro and whatnot. And yeah, we did joke about when we first did it that we would try and get involved with Cadbury and reenact some of the cool stuff as part of this livery. That's it's a bit of a folklore between Dad and Peter Jansen. So yeah, we're prepared to do all of that. I've got a yellow Shaw and Partners hat on, which all the stuff that's been paid for as part of our marketing strategies and whatever around the 2 races. So yeah, these things were, these decisions, a lot of this stuff was made in November, December last year. And obviously it's all come to light in July this year. So there's things we haven't been able to reverse, but you got to play by the rules. So we're not asking for heaven and earth, and don't want, special dispensations because my father was successful. That's not what it's about. But, we're just, like I said, there's been 3 other examples that we could find in the rule book. And yeah, hopefully we get a chance to, get Dad and Peter Jansen to the race. And I've got 10 kilos of cherry ripes in a box downstairs, and they'll be going to Sandown regardless. Being a type 1 diabetic, I don't snack on cherry ripes. So we need to, get rid of them in some way, shape or form.
Definitely. Well, talking about stuff that is definitely going to happen, how have you found working with Blanchards this year as opposed to Erebus the last few years?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't had a lot to do with the Blanchard racing team, but, they're not new to me. We've been, connected in various ways from families and whatnot over many years. Tim Blanchard and myself raced go-karts together in the late 90s, early 2000s. We were effectively teammates in go-karting, and we've been great friends for a long time, since that time. Perkins Engineering made a lot of pit equipment and stuff for Blanchard Racing Team in their first year. And you wind the clock back beyond that. My father was involved in the opening of the Cool Drive facility in Box Hill, representing Castrol when that facility was opened, I think 1998 or something like that. And beyond that, my grandfather raced round Australia rallies in the 50s, and John Blanchard Sr. was a mechanic for him in those rallies. So from the team and the family point of view, we go way back. So that's sort of an existing relationship. But yeah, I guess, as the sprint rounds have gone on, I don't necessarily have any involvement with the team. My first weekend racing with them was Townsville when we ran the Super 2 car. And obviously that was really successful with a pole position race win and a round win. And, there's no secret they haven't had a great year in terms of results in the main game in their first year expanding to 2 cars. So, to get the team some good results when otherwise has been disappointing, that, it really put a bit of a pep in everyone's step. So that was, cool to be a part of. And I think it was their first pole position, not their first race win. Aaron Love won a race for the team there in Super 2 last year, but their first pole and first round win. So, yeah, I guess if they have an honour roll on the wall, I won't ever come down off that wall. But, we've got a lot of unfinished business. I said on Greg Russ's podcast earlier this year that this pretty good chance that the BRT team will be my last Supercars team. Not to say that it definitely will be, but I'm happy there. They're great people. They're committed to the sport, and they've got all the ingredients there. And I hope I can be part of delivering them more results, because they're a great motorsport family, and their commitment to motorsport shouldn't go unnoticed. And I thank Tim and John for the opportunity. And yeah, my role really starts obviously at Sandown and Bathurst, and I've got to do a great job, and hopefully we get some good results and get asked back next year.
So I suppose you, going off all that, you don't feel any less pressure being with a real estate agent instead of being with a championship contender this year?
Oh, I mean, it's funny people talk about pressure. I mean, last year I was with Will Brown. We were probably one of the favourites. I led 20 or 30 laps of the Sandown race. But to be honest, none of that really weighs in your mind. I mean, your preparation starts when you go to the gym. I go, 3 days a week from January, February, and I watch all the races and just try and prepare yourself as much as possible. And your job doesn't alter, doesn't matter who you're driving for. So for me, I just turn up and try and do the absolute best job I can, maximum concentration, no mistakes, hand the car back to James, and hopefully we get good results. And I think I'm up to 9 1-year co-driving deals at the moment. I've never had a deal beyond 12 months. So being back with James is great. With this surfboard here I got with James on the Gold Coast when we won together, and we've done 5 years together. So it's a bit like getting back with an old girlfriend. You sort of know what's going on in a way, and just got to get on with it. But James has made no secret of the fact that the end of his career is nearer than the start of his career, and but we equally really are hungry to get the team, Blanchard Racing Team, and all the sponsors, Snowy River Caravans and whatnot. We really want to deliver them results, because everyone's putting in a large effort, and you want to be able to taste success together.
I assume this year, with the main drivers having to start, if there's an early safety car, it'll just be switch over to you guys and get your laps out of the way as soon as possible.
Well, it's funny. We haven't had any strategy meetings. When I first saw that rule, and I thought of last year at Sandown, where the top 2 or 3 co-drivers, which probably sounds like I'm going to pump my own tires up, but the top 2 or 3 co-drivers were actually ranked about 7th or 8th fastest amongst the main drivers. So my initial thoughts, and that's because the super soft tire was degrading so enormously that you had to drive within the limits, so you couldn't necessarily just push for outright speed. So you had good track position and a good car, you were, 3/4 of the job was already done. So, when I first heard about, Sandown in particular, I thought, wow, if the co-driver and the main driver have even pace, there could be, and I say could be, an opportunity where a co-driver may finish a race, but
Mm.
it wouldn't be your preferred option. But the problem
No.
is, and we've seen it before, I think it was 2007 or 2008 when Lowndes and Whincup were together. The problem you find is, let's say there's a safety car, and this is just thinking out aloud. I don't think I'm handing over any intellectual property because it's just my own thoughts. But if you do 20 laps and put the co-driver in, he has to get to lap 74 to do his minimum. And if there's a safety car at lap 70, he's in for another 40,
Yeah.
gets you to 110. And then you'll find yourself in a position that in that strategy where the co-driver does more laps of the race. If you've got a co-driver, main driver pairing where there's no difference in pace, which is rare these days, but it's possible. You've got, people that have been out of the main game for only half a season, guys like Hazelwood and Pye and whatever else. Hazelwood was racing at the main game at the start of the year, filling in for Brody. So, he's pretty au fait with these cars this year. But
He did pretty well
you
too.
might be in a position where if it's green flag running and your driver changes are slow or you whatever, you get to 54 laps for the main driver, and then you've got an option where either driver could finish the race, because that any driver change or brake pad change or anything can cause stuff ups, and you might want to minimise your variables, but. It's looking like now the way the super soft tyre is potentially a little different to last year and whatever else, and the racing's a bit different, that, that's probably unlikely, but you'd be strange not to consider it in a way, but ultimately you won't know until practice, until, see how your co-driver shapes up.
I never even thought of reverse engineering it that way around, where you run until your co-driver and then leave them in.
Just to expand on that, what I meant, and I didn't finish off my example, back when Lowndes and Whincup together, they were up against some teams that couldn't pair their two main drivers. I think from memory, Winterbottom was with Halliday and situations like that. So that strategy that went green for 102 laps in 1 year, and then there was a point where co-drivers had to get back in, but Lowndes and Whincup, there was no co-driver in the mix. They were both full-timers, and they just left one bloke in, and I don't think the intention was for him to not get back in. I think Lowndes did the first 110 laps of the race, and then they just put Jamie in and they're done. Whereas that then meant that, some of the teams that had genuine co-drivers kind of had to stop early. Yeah. Then they got smashed by Lowndes during that stint while the co-driver was back in, and then the main driver got back in and was never going to catch up, or vice versa, or run the risk of starting the co-driver. So, yeah, it's not completely out of the realm of what we've seen before, but, I guess I'm hypothesizing. Stranger things have happened, but, generally speaking, unfortunately, I think that it will be a little bit much of a muchness with what you've said.
Which the fuel at Sandown lasts a full stint, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I don't actually know, to be honest. I don't generally
I was hoping
too involved.
Yeah,
well, I mean, and I imagine the fuel consumption's changed from last year, because from what I understand, they're always tweaking the engines. I mean, that might be an incorrect statement, but I don't know what the fuel flow is. I guess I'd be lying. I don't know if you can do the 54 laps on one tank of fuel, if I'm honest. From my memory, I feel like maybe 45 to 50 is achievable at a guess, which is why most of the co-drivers did a stop, or do a stop. But again, I'd be lying. I mean, I'll find out Friday night after practice, what the fuel burn rate is, and quickly work it out. And then obviously that information filters through to the TV broadcasts, and people get to understand how long you can go on a tank of gas.
Who's your prediction for the win this year?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously we still feel we're a good chance, but if I was to take my race driver hat off and start talking Channel 7 commentary, I mean, the circuit and the event has been very kind to the Red Bull Racing team over the years. Will got pole position there last year, and we were on for a good result. Unfortunately, some things didn't go our way, but I think that combination of Will Brown and Scott Pye is going to be pretty handy. But obviously, Jamie Whincup and Brock Feeney won the race last year, so they're up against pretty stiff competition in team land. But then there's arguments that the Ford guys are a lot more competitive than they were last year. So I don't think you could probably count out Waters and Moff and Chaz and Holdsworth. That'd probably be the four people that I'd be keeping a really strong eye on if I was, a betting individual. But then there's plenty of combinations out there that have had success in the past. So, whether that's someone from Dick Johnson, because they've both got pretty solid combinations. It could be someone from Groves. I think the Matt Payne, Garth Tander combination is going to be very strong. Unfortunately, they've probably been a little bit up and down in their consistency this year, but I think, the cream often rises to the top. And like I remember last year that Kevin Estray was in third. So their package couldn't have been that bad considering, the Ford guys last year thought they had two hands to hide behind their back, yet this guy came out from Europe and ran third. So can't have been that bad, but that's another topic in itself. So, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of combinations that could do a good job. But, yeah, like I said, I think Red Bull Racing and those two Ford teams of Waters and Mostert would probably take some beating. But, I think Mostert finished a lap down there on lack of car speed last year as well. So there's a fair bit to turn around from last year.
It's not quite the same as last year with someone like Kevin Estray coming in. Most of the co-drivers are fairly known quantities. But are you predicting any dark horse out of the co-driver ranks to kind of spring a surprise?
Well, it's a funny question to ask a co-driver because, quite often, especially in the first few years I was a co-driver, you may qualify badly, and there's an expectation that if you're a good co-driver, you'll be able to pass everyone and get back up to the front. And that's just not the case. I mean, you're only as good as the machinery and the team around you. So it's sort of hard for someone, to be in a potentially uncompetitive situation and just, miraculously turn their season around from one individual's sort of, effort. I mean, it's not to say it can't happen, but if you start thinking about people that don't necessarily have the runs on the board, I'll be pretty keen to see how Kai Allen goes. Obviously, driving with Will Davison, he's signed up to race full time next season. The wildcard entry will be an interesting one. Obviously, Cooper Murray has got absolutely no shortage of car speed. And he could easily do as good a job in qualifying as Will Brown and Brock Feeney from the conversations I've seen and heard from the Red Bull team. So, those guys could spring a surprise in that respect because it's an unknown sort of entry. But then obviously Sandown can even throw up some interesting weather. So, Andre Heimgartner, for example, blitzed in Taupo in the wet. He and his co-driver might rise to the occasion, which is Declan Fraser, who was full-time last year. So he's, in the same lines as Hazelwood and Pye. So, yeah, I mean, there's no slouches out there. Everyone's probably got a really, good feeling for it, and there'd be, everyone's pretty hopeful they're going to do well. But the reality is only 3 people or 6 people stand on the podium, and there's only 2 winners. So more people are going to go home disappointed. But everyone goes in there with the best intentions, and I think there's no massive standouts or the opposite to whatever a standout is, but it'd be interesting to see.
So very diplomatic there.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of hard. I mean, I couldn't predict that. Someone that hasn't been on form this year is just going to miraculously click the fingers because they've got a good co-driver. It's a bit more to it than that, and whilst the teams that are consistently good are often the ones to back, I think the way Gen 3 is shaping up is a bit like the AFL, to be honest. The AFL this season, I don't actually follow it that closely, but it's been so close that you don't really know who's going to win each week because the competition's so tight. And that's a bit like Gen 3 because, Chaz Mostert won in Perth and went to Darwin and qualified 21st. So then they went to the next race in Sydney and they won again. So it's I think you're going to see a lot more of that because ultimately engineering becomes educated guesswork, somewhat well-educated guesswork, and quite often it works and sometimes it doesn't. So it can be a bit like throwing darts at a dartboard. Sometimes even someone standing a meter further back can get a closer bullseye than the person standing closer to it. So yeah, it's never been so tight in terms of competition. So I think that's what makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it, and wish you all the best. And thank you very much for your time.
No, you're welcome, mate. Thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully Sandown's kind to us, and then we'll be thinking about Bathurst.
Well, we'll be there cheering you on over the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Once again, a massive thank you to Jack for his time. I did say it was going to be a very brief discussion, probably 10, 15 minutes most. And as you saw, Jack gave me a lot of time and some very in-depth answers there. He definitely knows his stuff. And I can just imagine how, he's learned that off his father, knowing the rule book inside and out. Well, maybe if they knew it inside and out beforehand, they wouldn't have got themselves into this trouble with the racing at Sandown. But yeah, he's even chatting offline with him. He's gone in depth on that, and definitely knows his stuff. But yeah, massive thank you to Jack, and all the best for the weekend. There will be a second episode as per usual coming out on Tuesday, where I will be chatting with the Super 2 boys as well about the weekend, and especially good to be chatting with Brad Vaughan with his main game debut happening on the weekend at Sandown. And I will be at the track on Friday, Saturday and Sunday there at Sandown. So if you do see me, come and say hi. I don't mind chatting with fans. But anyway, and until next time, I'm still Dave, and I'll catch you later.